for coming out. How are you?
I'm very good.
Heckling has long been an Australian tradition. In fact, I'd say that we are the only nation in the world that has a public statue to a heckler. We've got that famous statue of YABBA, a regular attendee at sporting fixtures before the war, that was known for his heckling at sporting events in Sydney. We've actually erected a statue of him to immortalise his heckling at the Sydney cricket ground. Very few nations, I think, have done that anywhere at any time in history. So I was a little surprised to see our Prime Minister, Mr. Anthony Albanese, being heckled when he went to a public park down in Shellharbour to try and do a media conference.
Thank you, Alba. We're about to send an inquiry into offshore wind. Reckon you put that back, Alba? What's going on there? Why don't we put them out front of your place? Put them under your window in front of you.
Thanks for coming out. How are you?
I'm very good.
We don't want you wind farms, you don't want them off your property, get out of here. Get out of here, Albo. We don't want you here. Why don't you listen to previous Labor MPs?
We lost him. We lost him. We lost him. Nice dog, mate. Thanks for that, mate. About the importance of the steel industry for this electorate. The first job, the importance of the steel industry for this electorate. My message is very clear, which is we've got your back. We support blue-collar jobs. We support steelworks here. I don't think people who are shouting engaging in a discussion.
So it's easy to understand how Mr. Albanese was heckled when he went to a public park down south of Wollongong in Shellharbour a few days ago, because the Albanese Labor government has sold that area out. Not only the damage they're doing across the entire countryside, but in that particular area of Shellharbour, the one and only Labor's Chris Bowen has planned for a giant offshore wind farm off the coast of Shellharbour. And is it any wonder the locals are upset? Now, the positioning of these offshore wind turbines in New South Wales are purely political. They're not, of course, they're not on the coast of Sydney. They're not on the coast of any marginal electorates that Labor could use. Labor have dumped them off the coast of Newcastle in the north of Sydney and Shellharbour in the south of Sydney, the Wollongong area, because those areas are safe Labor seats, and Labor think they can dump these wind turbines in those areas and get away with it. That yes, there'll be some blowback to them, but it won't be enough that they will lose the seat. So they are dumping on the very people that are their own true blue Labor supporters. And these offshore wind turbines are being pushed by none other than Labor's Chris Blackout Bowen. No wonder the locals are so upset. Now, firstly, these are not just ordinary wind turbines that we see in the North Sea. These have, because of the depth of the water off the Illawarra escarpment there, where the water gets up to 1 kilometre deep, they're not suspended into the seabed on a pole. They have to be floating wind turbines. So just imagine the engineering difficulties of having a floating wind turbine the size of Sydney Tower, floating down there off the Illawarra coast, in water up to 1 kilometre deep, with giant mooring cables going down to the seabed to secure it to the ocean floor, in the middle of a whale migration zone. This is completely experimental technology. There's only a handful of floating offshore wind turbines that have been built anywhere in the world. And the idea that you're going to dump them in the middle of a whale migration zone is just reckless environmental vandalism. But it's being done by someone that simply does not have a clue what he is talking about or what he is doing. Just listen to this interview here when Chris Bowen was down in the area last year, claiming that these offshore wind turbines deliver constant renewable power.
Renewable energy and lots of it, and need constant renewable energy. Offshore wind is exactly that, constant renewable energy.
Clearly, the bloke does not have a clue what he is talking about. You've only got to go to the government's own reports, and it shows down there when you get 25 kilometres out to sea, that these offshore wind turbines will have a capacity factor of 34.5%. That is only marginally better than the onshore wind turbines down at Goulburn. So you'll go to all that additional expense, all that additional costs of having these floating wind turbines, all the cables under the sea, all the transmission lines going through National Park for a couple of percent extra capacity factor at best. Clearly, Bowen does not know what he's talking about. There will be many times with a 34% capacity that these wind turbines will be delivering zero power to the grid. Will have to be backed up 100% by big batteries. And offshore wind is proving to be a completely economic basket case, economically unviable. We've only had a few weeks ago, Shell decide that they are pulling out of all offshore wind turbine development, and they've actually writing off $1 billion. So Shell's belief that offshore wind turbines were the great panacea to this so-called mythical transition has cost that company $1 billion US. The things are simply economically unviable. And yet, Chris Bowen pushes on with these things. It's about time Bowen and Labor admit that these offshore wind turbines are a disaster, both economically and for the environment. We need to look at what China is currently doing. The news only came out a few days ago that last year, 2024, China had started construction on almost 100 gigawatts of coal-fired power stations in just 1 year. And they had over 120 gigawatts of coal-fired power stations commenced in the 2 years previously. And that's on top of the 1,000 gigawatts that they already have. And yet here we are in Australia with just 21 gigawatts of coal-fired power stations left, which both the Labor Party and the Liberal Party want to close those coal-fired power stations down and replace them and build more renewables, the policy of both parties, build more renewables, build these offshore wind turbines around the country to try and replace our coal-fired power stations. When China, last year alone, started construction on 5 times our total coal fleet of coal-fired power stations. Our policy is madness. These offshore wind turbines are madness. At the Libertarian Party, we'll call this madness out. All these renewables, these subsidised renewables, must be stopped. The subsidies must come to an end, and we've got to try and catch our nation up. We've got to stop our nation going backwards, in the backwards direction that this insane, this destructive, this pointless, this futile Paris targets and this net zero is costing our country. And as for Mr. Albanese, well, being heckled as he was is only going to inspire other hecklers around the nation. So the problem Mr. Albanese now has in this election campaign, he's going to find it difficult to attend any public place where people can just walk past, because people will continue to heckle him. Because no doubt he has been Australia's worst ever Prime Minister, and he deserves all the heckling he gets. May the spirit of YABBA live on.